Do you want to make your Minecraft storage system more fun? Well, I do. I want you to make your storage system more fun. It's been long enough since the last time I made a redstone conveyor belt video, and I think it's time that we do more buildstone conveyor belts. This time, we'll be animating a storage system. Now, for those of you who are new to buildstone and redstone conveyor systems, well, there is a pretty big reason why they should be used over water ones, and while there are some cons, I think it's best to show it. So a water conveyor system is fairly simple. You throw it in the water and it moves it. Now, the con with that is that you almost need a 3 wide space in most scenarios, so that way you can have walls so your water doesn't go all over the place. A redstone conveyor system, on the other hand, uses a piston and either mud blocks or some inset block and an upset block like wool to push the item along in a line. Now, this is slower. However, despite being slower, it takes up considerably less space on the actual push line. Additionally, a system like this can be used in the Nether because there is not water involved. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, why don't you just use a hopper line when you can't use water? And the answer to that is, well, there is no reason to not use a hopper line. Really, the only reason to not use a hopper line is because conveyor belts just look cooler. It's just a fact, okay? I can't help it. You use the conveyor system because it looks cool, and there's no other reason to use it other than that. Now, before we can get to any of the buildstone animation, I think it's probably wise that we lay out the actual storage system, because, well, without the storage system, we can't really store anything, and we don't have kind of a limitation on space. Now, I'd be dumb to not at least mention how we're going to deal with item sorting on our conveyor belt. With that, we're just going to use a simple redstone sorting filter, which basically reads the input of a item hopper and will then filter down to a certain amount of items and dump it into a chest. It basically reads whenever a new item is inserted and it hits over the limit and then puts it into the row. This is what we'll be using to take things off the conveyor and kind of force it into our storage system. With the storage system now in place, I think it's time we get on to what you actually came here for, the conveyor belt. Now, our conveyor belt is going to want to run on top of our actual hopper line. This is because mud will sit low enough that whenever I throw an item on the mud, you'll see it gets consumed by the hopper and goes into the storage system. So whenever we have one that is set up for a filter, it can just pull it off the line and move it in. The conveyor system itself is rather simple. It really just is pushing an item with a piston and then moving and cycling in the next one, and making sure at the end of your lines you always have something to keep it circulating. Now, one thing to keep in mind with redstone conveyor belts is that when you come to a corner, you need a upper piston to make sure that you are always getting pushed at least consistently around the corner. If you don't, well, sometimes it won't work perfectly and you'll have items all over the floor. Now, the actual conveyor pushing mechanisms themselves are fairly simple. If you want one that pushes an item, you're going to need 2 pistons, an observer detecting the block before, and then 2 wool blocks, a redstone dust, and a target block. Whenever this observer detects an update, it'll force the next block forward, and the process can continuously repeat on and on and on down the line. Now, the single block pusher is relatively simple and also smaller and cheaper. We've got just a single piston. We'll need a redstone dust, 2 wool, and then finally the observer, which basically is going to force that signal into this wool, lighting up this redstone dust, pushing it along the line. For example, it just pushes, and it just works. Now, throughout your conveyor belt, there are going to be points where you'll need to reset for push distance. In this scenario here, since I do not expect to have a block coming down the line at this point, I have set up sort of a system that reads my input and then delays and pushes on to a new line. So simply new block detected, 1, 2, and it's out the other end. Now, at the end of every line, you're often going to come to a situation like this. In fact, I think it's almost guaranteed you'll come to this situation, to where the pattern will not repeat because, well, when you do the math, you're always going to come around to a situation where you're going to either have to put 2 gray wool or 2 mud blocks next to each other. And for this situation, you just got to figure out which one you want to do. In my case, I like to do 2 mud blocks because sometimes items can get hung up. but once you do that, all you have to do is power this, which unfortunately I did not think to have a lever around me. You just power it, and then the system should self-sustain itself over and over and over until you inevitably unload the chunks, and then you have to just go and restart it. For restarting, we can hook up a restarter circuit. It's usually easier to do them with smaller conveyors, but for bigger ones, well, I guess I can show you what that looks like. The simplest form of restarting is just having a lever on every station so that whenever it gets stopped at a station, all you have to do is go and flick that lever and it'll restart the whole thing. However, we can interconnect them all with redstone lines and then kind of have a restart order. Now for a reset system, we are going to need an additional observer on every single station. Now, from these observers, we are going to have to funnel around and basically make a restarting line so that we go down the line in order to start the system. Now, the restarter circuit in and of itself is inherently simple. In the blue line here, I have lined out my restarter, and really all it does is, let's say we simulate a break at, let's say this station here. It stopped prematurely, or we deloaded the chunk, and this station now is stuck with the block. All we have to go do is flick our lever. We'll send a signal through the system, and it'll force a restart. Now, we could also, in theory, come up with some sort of chunk detector so it always reloads whenever we come back into the chunk, or we could just have a lever we can reactivate it simply. I would recommend doing this because you will deload it and you will have a stopped conveyor if you deload it. I can also not emphasize enough how important it is to have little bits of delay in the actual system, otherwise all of your pistons, well, you're not going to get around and have them all fire at once, but if you don't have a little bit of delay and you have two pistons fire at once, it can be not very good. Now, it's great that we have a working conveyor system, but all this only works if we can get items onto our conveyor, so let's look at that real quick. Now, getting items onto your conveyor is fairly simple. This is just a simple plopper system. All I gotta do is shove a diamond in there, and it will consistently plop out on the same base every single time around. And then it's just on the conveyor, and it goes, and it is getting filtered into our first hopper here, which is our diamond hopper. Simple system, easy to use, easy to hook up. 2 observers, a dropper, a powdered snow. And it always gets it in the center of that first conveyor so that it's not all over the place. This one consistently will put about 2 on every conveyor slot because, well, it's every other that it can pick one up, and every single one drops 1 out. So slow enough that it'll always make sure it goes into the hopper. You're never going to have them run around and not pick them all up. It works great. Now, the keen eye among you may have noticed that there are some copper chests here, and, well, now that we're finally in the 1.21.9/1.21.10 update, I thought it'd be cool to add copper chests and use the copper golem a bit with the system. So now let's step into implementing that. Now, my copper chests up top exist fully for the purpose of overflow protection. Essentially, if one of these lines were to fill up with any item, then they would start backfilling into these large copper chests up here. Now, if I have a copper golem up here, the copper golem will go and they will check the chests, and if they find an item, like in this chest here, find it, he's going to take it, he's going to insert it into this chest, and it's going to get moved down to the bottom chest for a lower copper golem to take and sort into the other chests. Now, for now, he's going to try and sort them into the chest because they're not full. However, get around that, we could build some sort of external sort system elsewhere, big shelves, chests on them, and have them kind of go up and down. On top of that, we could go ahead and do some stairs and get them to sort into with stairs, go up and down the stairs. However, copper golem pathfinding is not the greatest thing in the world, so we're going to avoid the stairs with this design and just use kind of a feed to get them down to a lower level. And now, to make sure that I don't have any copper golems dumping things where I don't want them to dump things, I've included a bit of rail in front of all of these chests. Rails block pathfinding, and they can't pathfind across the minecart rail, so they cannot get to the chest in this scenario to dump in whatever items are overflowing. Meaning we won't have to worry about having like diamonds end up in the stone chest or dirt end up in the cobblestone chest. It's just something that, well, makes the system better. And it's one of those concessions you have to make with a system like this. Everything can't be perfect because the copper golem is not a perfect mob, as much as we want him to be. You want a finished product? I'll give you a finished product. I have the system running now, and it is going fully through and filtering out where things need to go. As you can see, some items are getting sucked up, and as they come down the line, they're going to find where they get their sucked up point, and they'll get sucked up. I'm having them just randomly put on by a dispenser. So, see, that one got sucked, and now these diamonds are going to come, and they're going to probably, I think right here is where they go. And, yep, as you can see, it just filters through the system. You have items going through leisurely at their own pace, animated. It's not as quick as a water system, but it's not supposed to be as quick as a water system. It's more fun this way. You can actually see your items going into where they need to go, which is what I like about it. So what did you think of my animated storage system? Did you like it? If you do, there's a button down below you can hit for that. There's also another button that I hate to ask people to click, but I hear that it would get me closer to 2,000 subs, and that's coming up, so that would be cool. On top of that, well, whatever you like about it, leave it in the comments. That's also cool. That's a cool thing you can do. You just do the YouTube things. Okay, that was long-winded. Anyway, I've been Cadiot, and, well, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.